Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Gaming the System, the gaming podcast where we look at gaming through a feminist lens. Today we have myself, Matt, Caroline, Alex, and Jem, the full team, and we're going to be looking at arcade and pub games. Now, from what I've gathered so far, most people have a soft spot in their hearts and warm memories of pub games and arcade games. So we're going to have a look through them, have a chat, and presumably some some feminism will bleed in along the way. So, what we're going to start off with, thinking of arcade games as like you go to a bowling alley, there'd be some driving games, some shooting games, and then you go to a pub, there might be some darts, there might be some snooker. And some, I've only just thought of some other esoteric pub games, so maybe we'll ask about esoteric ones as well. So, our first topic, I'm going to ask Caroline, what is your earliest memory of arcade or pub games? Actually, so just arcade games. We'll move on to pub games in the second part.
Okay, well, because arcade games, so when I was 11, and this is quite embarrassing how old I was, I couldn't swim properly because when I was 4, I fell in a swimming pool and drowned, and I was terrified of it. This is all going somewhere, by the way. So when I was 11, my mum took me and my best friend to the local swimming pool every weekend to try, so I could learn to swim. And my friend Danielle taught me, and she's a very good person for doing that. But my favourite bit of that was the fact that they had Street Fighter 2. And as soon as we'd finished swimming, we could go and play Street Fighter 2. And my mum, very patient. I now look back on it and I think there wasn't really anywhere for my mum to sit or wait. And like, I feel kind of bad now that she had to just stand there while we were bashing buttons for ages. But yeah, Street Fighter 2, and that was one of the really like fighting games. I don't really play many fighting games these days, but I used to a lot as a teenager because they're a really good social game when you're a teenager. And Street Fighter 2 was the first one and I understood Hadoukens and I was obsessed with it. And I loved that. It made me so happy and it made swimming more fun. And so now I won't drown if I fall in the body of water, thanks to Street Fighter 2.
It's amazing the impact that games can have on real life and the way you live it. Jem, what are your earliest memories of them?
I think probably my earliest memory is the 2p penny pusher games. I don't know if they count, but
it all counts. If you find it in a seaside like arcade, it counts.
I got really excited today. I shared a picture of them just in case anyone has not had the pleasure,
or in case they think Tipping Point is what it actually is.
But they're basically games where you have to put your 2p in, and it goes down a little slide, and then it hits onto a platform that's sliding backwards and forwards, and if you get it at the right place, then it pushes forwards. I think these are 10p's. This is a sign of the times, isn't it? But you can still see the 2p ones, and if you get it in the right place, then all those coins are going to fall off the edge there and into the tray, and you're going to be rich beyond your wildest dreams. And if you're really lucky, you'll get like a pack of Union Jack playing cards or a little rubber ducky or a sweet. And I just remember I was obsessed with them. I loved them. And my parents would go to these, like, usually somewhere in Wales, it's like an amusement arcade near a beach or something. And I just spend quite happily spend hours. Well, it felt like hours. It's probably minutes, but just playing on these games, it just was my favorite thing. And I think it really appealed to, well, it probably is why I ended up loving Tetris and games like that, because I think it appeals to all that sort of filling in the gaps and the neatness and all of that. So yeah, gambling really though, isn't it? Because you'd always put them straight back in again.
No, I remember those. They're so that when you look at it and it pushes it off the edge, and just a little
so
child,
close,
you feel feeling rich when you've the volume of coins you get makes you feel like you're a millionaire when you've got one of those little tubs
the noise of them all falling down was so exciting as well, because it was so loud, and it would probably be 30p's worth of coins, but it was a lot.
I think I don't know if it's my earliest memory, but I think the one that it was so awesome that it has blown like the memories of anything earlier out of the way is Time Crisis 2. Because of the awesome red and blue and just the guns. Guns are so cool, and just getting able to hold a gun and shoot it, and you duck up and out of cover. And I got to the point that I could play the game from start to finish on my own on £1. So one set of lives, because it was just I'd played it so much. But I'm sure I've mentioned this before that I would always rank number 6 in the total list of scores, and they only show the top 5.
Oh no!
And I never broke that. So it's bittersweet. Alex, what are your earliest memories?
I think mine are very, very similar to Gem's, to be honest. It's mainly the 2p slot ones, they always really excited me, and I always associate them with memories of going to places like the Isle of Wight and Bognor Pier and things like that. And I always felt they were kind of almost quite magical, like the way they were lit up and all the sort of sound effects you got with them and all the other machines around, and just a sense of anticipation, seeing the coins on the very edge and just waiting and hoping that it was going to tip. It was always really, really exciting. Other memories in terms of arcade games are kind of quite hazy, but I do remember seeing, like you say, at bowling alleys and things, like you've got the shooting ones and the ones with motorbikes as well. I was always really tempted to try those, but I didn't feel like they were very accessible to me, obviously, because I felt like the moment I tried to climb on one, I was probably going to fall off, so I didn't even risk it. But I was always really tempted to give those a go, because my uncle, he has about, I don't know, maybe 7, 8 motorbikes that he has, and he was always really interested in those and thinking about how realistic they actually were, and things. So we're always keenly watching other people, but never having a go ourselves, I don't think.
I was thinking how, so talking about the sort of arcade games like the racing horses one, and oh my god, the hockey, the air hockey.
Oh, yeah.
Love air
What
hockey.
a game! What a game! And so things like that, and things like coin pushers, there's no gender, because there's no characters in it, so it can't have any representation in it. And I think that is actually really beautiful, because it means that I don't think anyone would go into like an old style arcade and feel like it's not a place that they belong. I feel like anyone walks into this gaming emporium and just runs up to a machine, and because when you're a kid, all the machines look massive. And I remember at general arcades, like electric game arcades, there was always, I don't remember like it only being boys. You go there with your parents, and parents take all the kids.
I think I think there's still a bit though of so I quite luckily I don't think any of them watch this podcast, so I'm going to be very descriptive, but hopefully they won't identify who they are. Which is a group of adult friends where we used to go to the bowling alley, as you say, and they had a really, and this is modern era, this is in the last 10 years, and they had a lot of all this arcade stuff set up. And there was a bit of a sort of like, oh, the women are going to go and use the halfpenny shove and do the drop the coins in there. And that was what the other women in the group wanted to do. They're like, yeah, but Caroline's going to go with the boys and play on the shooty games and the arcade games. And so I did feel like there was a weird delineation that somehow the halfpenny shove was a thing that women did, and that the sort of going and playing on the sort of violent hitty games were something that men did, which was weird. And I wonder if that was like a hangover from the fact that I was dealing with people in their 30s and 40s.
But Jem, has that been? Have you experienced anything in terms of that with your relationship with the more classic style of arcade games?
What, the gender split?
Yeah, just feeling like when you walk in, do you feel like these are the games that are meant for me, and these
No.
games aren't meant for me?
No, I never had that. I mean, when I was playing the two P push games, I was really little, and then because I grew up in the countryside, arcades were something I only came across very rarely. But when I was in my sort of late teens, I used to go down to London a few times a year to meet up with people on the mud that we played. And one of the things we used to do is go and hang out in a local pub in the centre of London. And then when we weren't in the pub, we were usually elsewhere. And one of the places that we used to go to was the Trocadero, which no longer exists, but was bloody awesome, if you excuse my language.
Yes!
Yeah, this is it. It doesn't that look just like amazing? And it was all of that.
Just like nostalgia kick, just looking at that.
Oh, and it just, I mean, you can see they're all men. And when you look at it, when all the photos that I found of this place, it was all guys basically. But it was like 3 levels or 2 levels or something, just full of arcade games. But I remember going there with a bunch of these people, and they were mostly men, and well, young men, and I remember that I managed to basically pull one of the other guys that was there, because I beat him on Daytona in the Trocadero, and he was so shocked because, like, girls can't play driving games, and he was just really, and that was it. He fell in love with me because of that, and yeah, I fell in love with him because he picked me up, which is very cliche. but yeah, no. So I used to pride myself actually on being and not playing the girly games. Not that there were really any girly games in arcades, and just really enjoying them. And I loved it. I loved the noise. I loved all the lights. Just the Trocadero was definitely one of my happy places, and it's quite sad that it
just because we're probably never going to talk about the Trocadero again. I just want to mention the fact that
I don't know. I'm sure I can bring it up.
in the so it was in the last. I think it would have been probably about 1993, 94, maybe a bit later, but because it was shut, didn't it, in like the mid-90s, so it can't be that much later. But they had an Alien experience where like you'd go in and it was like there was people dressed up as characters out of Alien, and they'd drag you through corridors and like and jump scares at you, and that was just. And again, that was there was a lot of like, oh well, you're a girl, you won't want to go through that, you'll be too scared. And I was like, I'm bloody well going now. I mean, I was terrified, obviously, but I wasn't going to lose face that I wasn't going to do it because I was a girl. So, just as I say, because we're probably never going to bring up the Trocadero again.
So the thing you both said then was that you would be the girls would go when in the scenarios where the girls went one way, you would, and the boys went the other way, you would go with the boys, and you loved it. You had a wonderful time. That was what you enjoyed. But for the other girls, it's sort of like the gender roles will have impacted. Some of them probably just wouldn't have liked games anyway, but some of them might have loved it. But the way they were brought up, they weren't brought up in that way, unfortunately, which I hope is something that is changing and will continue to change. Alex, because in terms of your in your intersections as both a woman and a disabled woman, how has that impacted your experience of going to arcades?
Certainly, there's some things in arcades that, or at least pub games in general as well, if we consider the whole spectrum. There are some things like, when I first started uni, we all went round to the student union pub and there was a pool table and we all played pool. And of course, I'm completely crap at pool because my hand-eye coordination is like the worst. You imagine me with a stick, just being like, and it was great because I had fun time just being rubbish at it, and everyone was like, okay, you just go and sit and have a drink and watch everyone else, because there was no way I was gonna like attempt to be any good at it. But yeah, I mean, it did have an impact obviously because I couldn't, I did stop halfway through, So I was a bit like, oh, can't finish playing pool with the others because I'm rubbish at it. But there's some aspects to certain games where there's a lot of hand-eye coordination and sort of bending and moving and around, and the physical aspects, which are a barrier to me, I would say. And when it's a group activity as well, it can be a little bit rubbish. But yeah, I hadn't really thought of it until now, to be honest. It's a good question to bring up, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, it's I think it's a when you think, okay, I really like this about what we do, because we think of anything to do with games. You think arcade games. What could that possibly have to do with feminism? And it's not just our feminism; it's our intersectionality. So there will always be crossovers, which I'm really glad. So I hadn't thought of that question until we were doing this, and I'm always really pleased when we find that collision point. So obviously, because the world's built for people like me, I've never had any issues with going in, but that's not really surprising.
Like,
So I don't have any interesting stories about it.
if you think about darts, for example, that's something I could never do, because you can imagine how dangerous I would be with darts in hand. It would not be a good thing.
I'm
I
pretty
really
dangerous
don't think.
after a few pints as well, Alex.
This is true, yeah. We should factor in the levels at which you should stop playing when alcohol is involved.
Just go up to the bar with a dart and say, "Give me a drink."
Yeah.
So you cut me off. How dare you?
But Matt, I mean, like there were games like the dance mats things. Did you ever do any of those? I mean, those were. I mean, I used to see quite a lot of young men dancing away on those, but they were mainly women who did them.
Yeah.
I mean, so there are some games, and there was. I'm trying to think. There was another one, but I can't quite think of it now. But did you ever feel that those were games that you couldn't do because they were not macho enough, not manly enough? I feel it just feels wrong even saying those words around you, because I know you push back against that, but just for the sake of argument,
I'm so pleased that you came up with that, because that just made me think of another tangent. Yeah, those things where I think you can in the gender roles, there might be things that you genuinely enjoy, but then that means that there are restrictions on things. So I don't think I'd like dance, like the dance games aren't my passion that I never got to do. That is my lost opportunity. So nowadays I'd be fine with it. I did ballroom dancing at university and really enjoyed that, especially the cha-cha-cha. Love the cha-cha-cha. You just made me think, talking about sent me off. So with gender expression, right? So it's only in very recent years that it started to become more a mainstream accepted thing. So rather than it was just lesbian and gay, you go, oh, there's bisexual, there's trans, there's queer, there's non-binary, there's intersex, and it goes off into the distance, because that's we're starting to see the gender as the spectrum that it is. And thinking about in the past, because it wasn't acceptable and people weren't taught about it, there would be opportunities for them to express themselves in the way that they feel they're most authentic. And I imagine that there were plenty of like, because you're not, as men, you're not supposed to enjoy dancing around and playing on girly things. But I think games offer a wonderful opportunity for people to explore. They might play as a woman in a fantasy game and go, and that sparks something and goes, this is evoking something really powerful in me. And then that might be like a spark that makes them, it offers opportunities to feel like your authentic self in a world that tells you that you're ill or wrong for that feeling. So I'm really, really glad that you brought that up, Jem, because I think that's a path that games can be really good for us all on.
It's interesting actually that you mentioned that, because I'm doing some research at the moment, and my supervisor, Barbara Mitra, she did some research into that, into the characters that people choose to play in an online game, and whether they gender swap and all of those sorts of things. And what they found was that if that people who are very settled in their sort of real world gender are less comfortable at playing a different gender online. They don't connect with it in the same way as they would if they're female in the real world and then they play a male character. They don't connect with it in the same way. But I think that it's really interesting as to what will happen now that as we begin to recognize gender as a more fluid concept, and people, this new generation of kids who are sort of feeling much more able to kind of like pick and choose really about where how they present themselves to the world. If they feel less sort of settled or set, and I don't mean that in a negative way, I mean that just in a, they're more open to it, then maybe that, as you say, these online environments will provide more opportunity to explore things that maybe that different ways of being that they can't do in the real world or the physical world. So yeah, I think it's a really interesting thing. I think there's a huge amount of opportunity that's put out there by games and by by playing different types of games as well. I think it's interesting because arcade gaming is very public, so there's another factor there, isn't there?
A way to really, because I think if you had a 16-year-old boy who was playing the dance game on his own in an arcade and just losing themselves, because that's where you see people at their most authentic, when they are lost in something that brings that they love. They can lose themselves in it, and I think that would be something that is potentially very powerful for them to be seen as they feel their most self. Caroline and Alex, do you have anything to add on that topic?
No, not on that point. I think you've said it really well, Matt.
Yeah, no, I was just wrapped in the idea, is because of course, like, I love D&D, and it's sort of like, I think what you were talking about there is very much, it's D&D is a powerful tool for that. But when you said there at the end, it's the public nature of arcades and stuff, and about what you're playing. And I think actually how Matt hasn't watched Wreck-It Ralph, right? And he needs to watch Wreck-It Ralph. There is a thing on that of like, the game that What's-Her-Face is in and stuff, and the sort of, nobody's playing that game, nobody's playing this game. And it explores a lot of the who goes to which bit of the arcade and stuff like that. And obviously, they're not as much a part necessarily of British life as they were of American life. But I think there is quite a lot of that. And I think especially in places like bowling alleys and ice rinks. It's the only place I can think of where there are arcades these days. I'm old, I have no idea. And I think that sort of public exhibition sort of thing is like, how comfortable do you feel? It's interesting.
I think in terms of my list of questions, I wrote my list of questions, but I didn't write any of my answers on it. So I've left that one to you. Where the last conversation was supposed to have gone, but I'm really, really happy with the tangent it took, was from the games that do have gendered representation in it. What are your impressions of the representation of women in those games, Caroline?
Oh, it's shite. I mean, it's generally, it's like, most of the arcade games, and I am going to go back to Wreck-It Ralph, and it's like, so the main female character is a young woman, and all the girls are racing princesses racing in cars, because you couldn't just be women racing in cars, you have to be princesses, and we're pretty, and we have cupcakes, and we have rainbows, and we have flowers. I mean, I love cupcakes and rainbows and flowers, but that's not the point. They should, which is why I love the character that she's a glitch on the whole. She's like not quite like other women, but I think that it's a brilliant representation of how women are represented in those games. I haven't spent as much time in arcades in modern eras, but I'm pretty sure some of those games as well have the same problem that car shows do and stuff, of having the sort of the silhouette on the side of the arcade machine, having the silhouette of the woman's body. Definitely seen that.
That's very much a thing I remember. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now that you've said it, it's come into my head. Yeah.
And that's sort of like, well, you don't need to know anything about this woman other than exactly the shape of the contours of her body. There's a great Twitter account, social media. I think it started off as a Tumblr actually, of headless women in posters, which was about how in so many representations in the media, women are represented headless. There's just a body of a woman. You don't even see the face. You don't even see the head. And the side of arcade machines are terrible for that. Just the sort of like, why would you need to see her face? What's that about?
There's a South Park episode where they make a spoof. There's a spoof alcohol ad, and it's basically going, if you drink this, you'll get cars and women and sex and money. Cars, women, sex, money. And that's literally what is marketed to 15-year-old boys, which is my theory about how everything is made from the point of view of a 15-year-old boy.
Which is really depressing when you think that the Mel Gibson movie What Women Want is 20 years old now, and the whole point of that movie was that how outdated that view of advertising was, and how it was just the sort of man-child that is that character portraying that onto people, and it doesn't actually work. And yet we're still here 20 years later.
Yeah.
I have no hope.
I have hope, but the world is hurting my soul a bit at the minute. So I'm trying to. It's hard. Yes, the world is
right
for sensitive souls. It can be, but yes, I am optimistic. Alex,
Yes.
I'll remind you what the question was: representation of women in arcade games.
Yeah, from what Caroline said about the silhouettes and things, I do have vague recollections, just like odd snippets in my head, of arcade games being some of the worst examples of hypersexualization of women. But that's all I can remember, I'm afraid, because it's really patchy in my brain for some reason. And also probably because there were no women represented in the types of games that were on show. Yeah, I think that's pretty much all my brain can conjure up, is that it's just some of the worst examples, or no examples at all. Yeah.
I've seen
Not
examples
even there.
from fighting games like Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat.
Yeah.
They're all just a waist that's thin, and then boobs, shoulders, thighs, legs, hair.
Yeah.
That's how it all looks.
Or eyes, huge eyes.
Yeah.
Jem, what was your impression?
Well, yeah, I mean the same. I think it is a very. I'd be quite interested. I'm trying to think. I did go into an arcade a few years ago, and I'm trying to think if it had changed at all. But I don't think it has, because I think they're a bit of a strange law unto themselves. Arcades, really. I mean, this was on a beach. So this was down in Devon, and it was like a seaside resort. And I think the one that I'd been to before that was in Milton Keynes, near there with their cinema shopping centre there, and that it's just a lot of loud, flashy, come here, do this. And I think I've seen an increase in those ones where you have to hit things, and I feel like even if they've moved away from the sort of visual sexism, then they're still perpetuating this idea that this is a man's environment. The colours are all very masculine. The everything is lots of metal, and I don't know. There's just something about it that just feels like it's geared up to appeal to a certain type of brain.
Yeah. So, fortunately and unfortunately, the arcade gaming industry is going the way of the floppy disk. It is slowly waning away, and it's possible that the pandemic was the death blow to it. It isn't very surprising that it hasn't really developed in terms of its messaging and marketing, because it's a dying industry, which means that it's mainly going to be older people, like old industry people, still making the same things that they did, because it's not growing. And now, why would a kid go to play an arcade game like video game when they've got everything they could possibly do on their phone or on a console or on a PC? Yeah. Last question on arcade games is: if you had the space, what arcade game, if you could have one, what arcade game would you have?
So
Caroline, please go ahead.
I was very excited about this because I suddenly thought, right, this is exactly what I want. But then when Alex mentioned the motorbikes earlier, I was like, shit, that's the good answer. That's what I should have gone for. I'd forgotten about those. But House of the Dead, absolutely, no question, the absolute most classic. Yes. Amazing classic art. I mean, I played lots of the PC versions, and also Typing of the Dead, which, if you ever want to improve your typing skills, is a fantastic game. But the arcade version nearly made you spit. But the arcade version of House of the Dead is, to me, that is what a classic arcade game is. I think possibly as well because the Dreamcast had a really good version with attachment guns that you could play. Again, showing my age there, mentioning the Dreamcast. But it's just such the basic, zombie monsters coming at you, shoot it. Zombie monsters coming, shoot it. Big boss, the big bosses were amazing. They were usually like flying monsters in the sky. 2 of you, perfect co-op. It's simple, it's straightforward, and nothing's ever really been better than it, in my opinion. So House of the Dead, hands down.
You know, you saying that, you've just reminded me of, I think, House of the Dead 4, with this great big hulking thing that runs through the sewers after you.
Yeah.
And so I think I'm going to take Time Crisis 2 and lay it to rest, because I've played it, and go, thank you, dear friend, and push it off into the Viking longboat. And so I'm going from right now. I would love House of the Dead 4 because I never finished it. And the shotguns were so awesome. There was another one where you get an Uzi, and just anything with a gun just feels awesome. So
but just the monsters were so cool. There's just something about the monsters that you were fighting that I always, even with shitty graphics and stuff, they always just struck me as being really awesomely designed. I love that game.
I think it's an unappreciated art because they've sort of been left behind. You don't really think about the people who made them. Alex, how about you?
I've never played it in arcade form, but I'd quite like Pacman. Because, it's a classic, isn't it?
Yeah.
You can't really argue with the fact that it is probably one of the most well-known arcade games out there, I would say. I mean, I don't know, I suppose it was originally an arcade game and then turned into other forms of game. But yeah, that would be my answer, I think.
And also a good one for discussing female representation, because it's again, everyone knows I've learnt most of my life from Wayne's World now from the previous episode, but Ms. Pacman being the sort of the first female gaming character type thing.
Yeah. Very true.
Okay,
you put a bow on Pacman, you've completely changed.
We need to do an entire episode about sexualized animals because they're everywhere. It's mad.
But I do feel at this point I should mention there was a thing on the Gamergirls subreddit, Girl Gamers subreddit today, where somebody had found a review on Steam where some random angry man was complaining because a game had a female hippo as a dungeon monster. And he then has, and this is what I love here, is he's gone to the effort of counting the ratio. He said there are 3 female and 1 male monsters in this dungeon so far. I'd like to see more male monsters in the dungeon. Which, I don't know what's worse, is whether he's gendering the hippo, whether he wants to see more male monsters. He thinks men are underrepresented as monsters, which is quite phenomenally surprising. But yeah, just felt I had to throw that out there.
If I could have a superpower, I'd like to have a slap that could hit people into self-awareness. That makes them go, huh, everything is male everywhere, isn't it? Maybe this is actually a positive example of when you go, actually, you can't have everything you want. Maybe one day. Jem, what would you have?
I can't remember what the question was.
If you could have one arcade game, if you had the space, what would you have?
Oh God, it would be Daytona. It would be the racing games because I loved it. Like that, you got to sort of like sit in a car and drive. Before I was driving, and yeah, no, I just really loved it. I just really enjoyed the racing games. I think I did put a picture of like the little machines that you do them, but and also it's like a lot of the other games that I would have said, which would have been Pacman. That's not it. That's a penny pusher. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Yeah, it would have been Pacman or Pong actually. Real old school.
Really?
But yeah, I did really enjoy that game.
Fun. I feel Pong is over romanticized.
Well, I liked the one with the brick. There was a brick one which wasn't Pong, but was later.
Brick break.
Yeah,
no, I know what you mean.
Yeah, you see, those are the dance mats. That's not. We haven't talked about that yet.
We'll come back to that.
God, I love pub games. That one.
But yeah, no, the Daytona, because I just think it would just be so cool to have in your house. I know that they did bring out like the Wii had like a little steering wheel, and I think one of the other consoles did, but they were never any good because they weren't attached to anything. Yeah. So it'd be really easy to like.
You've not got that surround sound that you got in those seats as well.
Yeah, yeah, it was just awesome, and also people could crowd around you and watch if you were being, doing really well. I wasn't that good. I was good for a girl.
Good enough to snag a boyfriend.
Jem!
No, I'm not. I'm not saying that. That's what they all said. No, I was awesome. But yeah, no, I think definitely one of those.
You just made me think that some of the coolest things about arcade games, especially when you're a kid, you get to simulate doing something that adults do that you look at and go, oh,
yeah.
Yeah.
I do like driving now, though, like in my real car. Bit of a girl racer. I know that's a sexist term as well. Girl can't say anything today.
Okay, I think that will. Does anyone have anything else to add on the topic of arcade games for now?
I was just going to ask, does bowling count as an arcade game?
I think that counts as. No, I think
it
counts as another kind of game.
Bowling, but I can come back to that later.
I love bowling. Yes. I think we can definitely wrap that up in another episode.
Cool. No worries, I'll hold on to it.
Cool. So in that case, we will bring that segment to an end on arcade games and move into the area of pub games. Pub games are incredibly cool, very vintage, but I feel like everyone probably has stories of when they're in pubs and playing snooker, darts, pool, pub machines, pub quiz machines that are awesome. And there are like other things like shove halfpenny and this weird thing where you've got pins and you swing a dangly thing into them. So starting off as we did with the arcade games, what are our earliest memories of pub games? Jem, I'm going to go to you first.
Ooh, probably. I used to spend a lot of time in pubs. My parents took me to quite a few pubs when I was younger, but I don't remember playing any games in them because we were just too busy eating crisps, I think. But I think probably my earliest memory is pool, is playing pool in pubs when I was a teenager, and just hanging out for hours on end in a pub, and the whole like winner stays on, and the anxiety around that. Like if you were sort of like a casual pool player, then the idea of doing the winner stays on thing was always horrible, because you didn't want to have to play with some strange old guy that like lived there. So yeah, no, that would probably be my. And I did like pool, actually, and again, that's a game that a lot of women don't play, although in my social group quite a few of us did. But yeah, I think it's I was thinking about it from a physicality perspective. There's some issues with pool, because they tend to find a sort of place where they can fit them in. So there's always this thing about like people walking past and the space, and when you're leaning over and you're, and there's a whole thing about, as a woman, if you're wearing like a low cut, or not even that low cut top, and you're leaning over, if there's somebody sitting at like sort of chest height, there's also sort of, or the fact that you just feel a bit exposed. The whole thing just felt quite. I mean, yes, you've got a great big stick in your hand, but other than that, there was something about the physicality of pool tables that I think were not conducive to young women playing. But that didn't stop us.
No, but I completely agree, because it was always, for me, definitely as a teenager, like, or not before I was 18 was I ever in a pub. But that sort of, but as you say, it's cleavage and ass. It's just like, if you lean over the pool table, somebody's leering down your top, and I feel if you're having to take quite a long shot and leaning quite over, your ass is sticking there, and you never know who's going to walk past and grab or slap your ass. And of course, I like to think, because Matt's told me I have to be more optimistic now, that doesn't happen as much now in 2021. But it definitely, if you were doing that in a pub in 2001, 20 years ago, that was just a consequence. And the last time you say we had a big stick. The last time a guy did that to me in 2001, I smacked him around the back of the head while he was drinking out of his pint glass, and I was the one who got in trouble for injuring him. So.
Yeah, we're gonna
maybe that was assault.
We're gonna lean into the gendered nature and how gender impacts pubs in a little bit. Did you have an earliest memory, Caroline?
Yeah, well, I've never been in a pub till so mine was more that when I was, this is more of like a family folklore story. So when I was little, my mum worked and my dad looked after me at home, and my dad may have taken me to the pub a few times, much to my mother's chagrin. So apparently, according to the family, I don't really remember this, when I was 2-3 years old, when fruit machines were still very much a thing in pubs, anytime any of the old guys were playing at the fruit machine, and when it went ding, 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 I would just shout, "Money coming down, money coming down." And that has now become family law, that anytime anything good is happening or anything, it's money coming down. So I'm guessing that the fruit machines is my earliest memory of pub games.
How about you, Alex?
I couldn't think of one, to be honest, because I don't think they were much of a thing in any of the pubs that I went to. That's to say, I don't really frequent pubs that much. Less so nowadays, especially during COVID. But I think during uni they were definitely more of a thing, because I was at uni and that was fine. But yeah, I couldn't think of one, to be honest. I think probably the only time I actively participated in pub games was at uni, and the earliest one of that was pool. And as you have already heard, it was uncomfortable on multiple levels. And I didn't think of the obviously there was that extra layer of being a woman as well, but I didn't think to actually talk about that as well. But it just was subconscious, I think. But yeah, no, there's multiple layers there, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, with me, I think Again, I don't know if it's the earliest, but it's sort of the overpowering ones. Probably the pub quiz machines,
Mm.
and especially playing them with my friends. And between the four of us, we were pretty good at it, and like being able to make more money than you spend occasionally. That feels really cool. But I get
rare.
very rare because that's why casinos stay in business, because you lose more often. Every time you lose, they win.
We actually had one, Matt, in the I used to call it the Swedish. It's really near the Swedish Embassy in London. There's a really nice pub, and it's the Swedish pub because it's mostly populated by Swedish people. And the quiz machine in there, my brother and I had a really good run on it. We were having the best run we'd ever had, and I think we'd won about £7. It crashed. The machine crashed, and we sort of went to we're like, give us our money, and they were like, nah, can't help it. We don't operate the machine and stuff like that. I was like, no.
It's a racist machine.
Back
I
to
don't
our
want you damn
republic.
Englanders winning our with our money.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's a shame Daniel can't defend himself. So leading into the topic that Caroline and Jem you touched on a moment ago, I remember thinking just as a younger guy in a pub, it's always filled with intimidating old guys, and I felt intimidated, and you don't feel like it's their place and you have to tiptoe around them. So I think Caroline, we'll go to you first. Did you feel intimidated in pubs? What did the atmosphere feel like for you as a woman going into a pub to play these games?
Okay, I could talk for hours about this, but what I'll do is, and apologies to anybody who's known me, I'm going to tell you my Glenda Jackson anecdote, because, so for those of you who don't remember who Glenda Jackson is because you're young, Glenda Jackson was actually a famous actor, first of all, but she was a Labour MP from the 90s up until the late 2000s, and she was the MP for Hampstead and Highgate. And I went to school in Highgate, and she came to give a talk at my school when I was 17. So I went to a small girls' private school, and up the road was the big boys' private school. And the sixth form would get these joint talks every week. So the room would have about 400, 500 teenage boys in it and about 50 teenage girls sitting in the middle of it. So it's already a sort of slight power disparity in that situation. And so Glenda Jackson was giving the talk, and Glenda Jackson, bless her, was giving a really good talk about glass ceilings and about the barriers that still face women. And me, as a horribly arrogant, privileged, middle-class white girl in 1999, thought, screw you, I've got all the power I need. I can do anything I want. I had no understanding of the disparities that existed. I had no understanding of my privilege, but also the things that I was buying into, all the stuff I've ranted about in terms of, like, you know, sort of by rejecting what it meant to be like girly and like I'm not like other girls, therefore I'm cool because I'm like boys, all that bullshit. So that's the sort of awful person I was at that point. And so Glenda Jackson gives this speech, and I mean, I think you all know, so we're not going to surprise you that I was the sort of person who always had to put their hand up and ask a question at the end of a speech. And so I put my hand up and I said, but this isn't really true, is it? I am confident that there's nothing I as a woman can't do. There's no glass ceilings. There's no barriers to me. There's nothing stopping me. Why are we still fighting this? I want to go back and slap myself. But Glenda Jackson, and I'm sure she said other things, but what I heard was she said, there are still pubs in this country that women don't feel comfortable going into. At which point, the row of boys behind me, who are my mates, burst out laughing because they couldn't imagine me not going into a pub, because I'd been into every pub in North London and I was Caroline, who's always out and always up for a laugh and always out drinking. But what they didn't realise, and what I didn't consciously take in those days, is that me going to a pub was such a different experience for them. My experience was, you know, as I said, the thing earlier about the guy grabbing my arse and me then having to slap him around the back of the head, or the other guy grabbed my arse and I grabbed him by the wrist and had to walk him over to the bouncer and get him removed. Now, I'm a bolshy, difficult person. Most people wouldn't be able to do that. And it was, for me, the kind of person I was. It was like, right, I'm going into these spaces and I'm going to be difficult and I'm going to think. But it was a fight. It was a battle. I wasn't comfortable. I was challenged about it all the time. And I was considered unusual, as that's what the laughter was about. So for me, yes, I was in pubs all the time. Yes, I was trying to take up that space. But no, it wasn't comfortable. And particularly, you know, I'm touching on it slightly, but the threat of sexual harassment or worse was there constantly.
Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. The thing of not belonging that we've talked about in gaming often, you just made me think of, you had to fight to exist in a place where like the boys can just sit and exist, whereas you've constantly got things pushing back against you. And you can go there and you can enjoy things, but as with when you are often the only girl doing something, you're having to fight in order to make that, to be in that position. And there are so many people, like you say, who get sexually harassed and then don't do anything about it because they're scared, because they don't want to fight, because intimidated, for so many completely valid reasons. Because people say, well, you're in a place you're not supposed to be. If you weren't in the pub, you wouldn't get sexually harassed. And so, boy, I've been thinking about this recently. The boys will be boys argument, and thinking that it just means boys can't control themselves. It made me think that the trope forever has been that women are too emotional. They're too emotional to work, too emotional to lead companies, too emotional to be in government, too emotional to do anything other than look after kids. When men are supposed to be so calm and calculated and logical, then why are like 90% of violent crimes committed by men? Why is domestic violence and abuse so profoundly common all over the entire globe? Why are there constant wars? Why is there constant male violence? Because if men get angry, they get stroppy, and then they hurt people. And so it only struck me recently. I'm sure that this is something that everyone else has thought of forever. But men are their anger is tolerated, as boys will be boys. They never learn to control it, and they get angry and they hurt people. And that's that thing of we say 100 women were sexually assaulted. They don't say 100 men sexually assaulted women. And how it's always framed, how men are always protected, and how their spaces are. They just they get to exist as that, and their anger goes. They're never taught about what anger is and how they're not supposed to use it. So that's my rant for today, Caroline. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to do that. Alex, what have you had experience of the atmosphere of pubs?
I'm really glad you asked that question, Matt, because it made me reflect about how I feel about going to the pub. And I can honestly say, even now, I still don't feel comfortable. I've never felt comfortable, really. Not 100% comfortable in a pub. And that's for multiple reasons. One, because it's predominantly male dominated. And two, well, actually three, there's going to be three. But anyway, two, the men are loud and rowdy and boisterous and bigger than me, because either I'll be at wheelchair height or I'll be standing, which doesn't make me that much taller, but still I'm quite petite. Even if I go to a pub with a group of friends and I go up to the bar by myself to order a drink, I feel intimidated because I'm that much smaller up against the bar compared to the men around me. But generally speaking, I always feel slightly anxious in pubs just because they're just loud, boisterous places, usually filled with men. I mean, I can't say that I don't have a good time in pubs, because I can, that's fine. But I always have a sense in the back of my head that, oh, I don't want to stay too much longer here. because I don't feel entirely comfortable. And also the other thing, which is an obvious thing, not every pub is accessible to me, because a lot of them were designed without disabled people in mind. Very often the toilets are upstairs, especially in Spoons, always upstairs in Spoons. So that's another barrier. And generally speaking, the tables are usually packed in, hemmed together, so navigating them is rather difficult. And again, it's the extra layer of like, you feel, I don't want to say vulnerable, but you do feel more vulnerable in a way being in your chair in a pub, because you're that much lower down. Nobody really looks, you're like always at hip height, so it's just really difficult navigating the space, especially with drunk people in it.
Yeah.
And then of course you get the, oh, isn't it great you're out, let's pat you on the head,
You're so
aren't you having
inspiring.
fun? Yeah, it's so great that you're out, you're so brave, all that shit,
You glass them.
which was a common thing. Not so much, well, it still happened in clubs, but in a different context. But yeah, I don't know really. Yeah, it did make me reflect on how I'm never quite 100% comfortable in a pub. Yeah,
Yeah, it's another thing of like the world telling you, the environment telling you. It's like level design in a game.
yeah,
It tells you don't belong here.
Mm.
This isn't the right place for you. It wasn't built for you. Stop trying to come
yeah.
here. Jem, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with everything that's been said. I think, they are very toxic and uncomfortable environments. They're not designed for women or children. And, I think the thing is that I've been in lots of pubs. I've had lots of fun in pubs. I've been there with groups of friends, and I've been there where we've rented the back room of a pub, and they've been awesome. The gothy pubs and the metally pubs tend to be the best and tend to have the nicest atmospheres and the least gropey people. I've been in pubs where you couldn't walk to the toilet without having your ass grabbed or something. It was horrendous. And I think with what Caroline was saying about like sort of standing up for yourself and all of that, you're very much, you feel like you can't say I'm uncomfortable, this is uncomfortable, this is making me feel awkward, because then you are showing fear, and we all know that when you're in a predatory scenario, you do not show fear, so you have to kind of laugh it off, and it is hard. I definitely was not the kind of person who'd turn around and slap anyone who touched me. That I just did not have the confidence to do that. I wish I had, but I used to stick close with your friends. That's why the girls all go to the toilet together. It's not because we all want to gossip, it's because it's safety in numbers. When I was 18, I worked in a pub, and it didn't last very long. It was just a local country pub, and we had some really busy weekends where there was big shows on locally, so it was manic, and I quite enjoyed that. But there was always, it doesn't matter which pub you go to, wherever it is, there is always at least one or two old geezers that just sit there the whole evening and get drunk and think that your job is to entertain them and to cheer them up and whatever. And this pub was no different, and it had a few people who weren't, they didn't do anything, they just intimidated me. And then I'd only been there a few weeks. I was literally just 18. And the guy that was the bar manager said, I'm not going to be back this evening, so can you lock up? And I was like, no, I can't. I just couldn't do it. And I had what I now recognise to be like an anxiety attack, but at the time I didn't realise it. And I just was like, no, I can't do it. I'm not doing it. And I refused, and they sacked me. And, that was completely unreasonable of them to do that. But there was nothing, I had no recourse, I had nothing that I could do about it. And now I'm quite horrified really by it, but because there wasn't going to be anyone else there. They were going to leave me, an 18-year-old girl, who'd been working in the pub for a few weeks, to kick out the last drunks and to lock the doors and all of that, and then walk back to my car and home at 11:30 at night. And, it just, yeah, it's look, see, it's even distressed my cat.
It just perfectly illustrates how just terrifyingly dangerous the world is for women. That just, it's obscene that it isn't the only thing that is talked about. Because you think about the, so take Florida in America, for example, because I've heard statistics of this. There are, so this is the place that wants to do the 6-week abortion ban. And they said, someone asked him, oh, what, even in cases of rape? And he said, yes. And he said, but our way to deal with that is we are going to stop rape. And everyone went. But in Florida, there are 6,000 untested rape kits, which means that in Florida, there's potentially, if you say that, we say there are 6,000 rapists, and you go, oh, maybe there are a couple of repeat offenders. Even if we say there's 1 in 6, there's 1,000 rapists out there. And we know that like rape is like the highest form of sexual assault, and then rape and murder, because people who do these things, they escalate. They don't start at rape most of the time. They and it's the things they start off with, like flashing, for example, and then grabbing arses, and then it goes up and up because there's no stop. Because like you said, Jem, there's no support for you. Someone grabs your ass, and unless you turn around and slap them,
which I don't advise. I
Yeah.
just want to point.
because
it
again,
always
there's that
escalates.
entitlement. The reason men do it is because they feel entitled to you, and they're brought. They believe that because there's no. It should be they grab your ass. You should, the waiter should come over and say, look, call the police. Bouncer picks them up, takes them outside. They get arrested. They get charged, and then that's it. It should be a simple pathway like that, but of course it isn't. And it should say, well, just if we could. Campaigns to just reveal, show everyone how dangerous the world is really, because there's so much propaganda, and it's just.
If I could just say, Matt,
please, yes.
What I think is very interesting about this is that, like, normally, like, you know, you don't normally have me, Jem, and Alex all talking about scary experiences. Like, we're normally talking about gaming. We're normally online. We're fine, and we're really positive. And I think it's a revealer of just like what the experience is of going to the pub for a women, that we all have this sort of like, it's dangerous. It's, even if you're having a nice time, there is a constant awareness in the back of your head. There is something there. And, you know, my stories about when I was younger are all built out of bravado over years and stuff like that. But there's at least 50,000 there's at least 50 times where I didn't grab the guy's arm and break and drag him off and stuff like that. And I think it's just, we're not interesting or special. This is just what a woman's experience is of being in a pub.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. It's that everyone's got a story. Everyone's got to ask them about it, but no one asks because they don't want to know, because it's uncomfortable. And again, it shows that what we're doing here is a place where we can talk about those things in the gaming through a feminist lens, because this is the fact that women aren't safe is unacceptable, and the only way to do anything about it is to try and talk about it and get it out there as much as we can. We're going to go on to the wild card. Is there anything else anyone wants to add before we go? Good. Excellent. So for this, when I went to buy Deathloop, I went to buy it straight away because I saw all of the reviews come out, and they're like, oh, that's the best game ever. And so I ran straight to Maidstone, which is a half an hour drive away, and tried it in 2 games and walked in. I couldn't see it on the walls anywhere, thinking, oh, has it sold out? But then it was on. I looked at the ad again, and it said it was out on the 14th. But all the reviews had come out on the 13th. So I was a day early.
Yeah.
And I thought, but I went up to the counter, lovely, wonderful girl there who helped me out. And I said, she asked me what my first initial was. And I said, M. And she said, oh, is that N for November? And I said, no, it's M for Movember. And then we were trying to think of other words for initials. Couldn't think of any. And then I went, we should have a gaming phonetic alphabet.
Ah,
All right.
Okay.
So what we're going to do between the four of us, we're going to take a letter each as we go around, and we're going to come up with a phonetic alphabet.
I can just instantly see this is totally my thing and totally not Gem's thing.
I'm gonna pick at random who goes first, because I spent a good 10 minutes trying to think of an A when I first started. It took me such a long time. So what I'm gonna do? How am I gonna choose? Okay, we're gonna try rock paper scissors.
What? Some rock paper scissors.
gonna work.
Okay,
Cool.
so the first person to lose goes first.
How does this
Okay.
work?
I don't know.
But Matt, you have been in charge.
We'll see what happens. It'll be fun. Okay, rock paper scissors.
Oh my god.
Gem definitely lost.
Well, that couldn't have worked better.
Can I look it up? Can I phone a friend? So I have to come up with a game.
A game that begins with A.
A game that begins with A. Animal Crossing.
Alex, we're going to go round in clockwise. Alex, B.
B. Bayonetta.
Bayonetta. Caroline, C.
So I'm cheating. I opened my Steam library and it's not a game that begins with C. Genuinely. So I'll have to use my brain. Crazy Taxi, back on the Dreamcast.
I am D. Dying Light, the sequel of which is going to come out next year, and it's going to be incredible. I can't wait. Gem, E.
EverQuest. Ancient MMO. But I didn't really play very much.
Alex, F.
Oh no. Forza. Yes.
Very nice. G, Caroline.
Oh, yeah. I'm too busy baiting other people. Grand Theft Auto. What else?
So H. H. Heavenly Sword. I. Gem.
Ico. Awesome game. Definitely recommend it.
Alex, J.
Jack and Dexter.
K, Caroline.
Can I go with a fictional game? Can I go with Kingdom Scrolls from Dead Pixel that's not actually a real game? Okay, which case I'm going with Kingdom of Amular, which is in my Steam library and I've never installed and never played.
Very good. L. I'm going to try and not do Lord of the Rings or Lego. I'm going to go with... difficult. If you think of no, we have to do it. We have to do it on our own.
That's very patriarchal thinking, Matt.
I'm gonna have to go with just Lego Pirates of the Caribbean. Then I'll see if I can think of a better L as we go around. Gem, M.
Mario Karts, obviously.
N, Alex.
N.
I'm such a numpty. Lara Croft. Sorry.
N.
We need to put some music underneath.
Me singing the countdown theme doesn't really help, does it? But
I can't. This is really hard. Okay. Got to think.
I've got two that I could help you with, but I'm not allowed to.
I know.
Or is she allowed to phone a friend?
Shall we? We can each have a phone a friend. That's a good idea.
Okay.
Hello.
You just go.
Hello. Could you help me? I need an M.
How about the game, the popular roguelike Noita?
Okay, we'll go with that, Noita. Thank you very much.
That sounds like you made it up.
It's a real game. Both my partner and my brother have like hundreds of hours on Noita. It's a proper game.
Sure.
Mm.
Caroline.
Game I really loved, Orwell. Really good, sort of like you go hacking through people's personal details and stuff, and then you feel bad about it because they get arrested for crimes. So yeah, good game.
Cool. Prince of Persia, P. Q, Jen.
Quake. Oh my god, my housemate used to play this into the wee hours doing rocket jumps, practicing rocket jumps, and then he couldn't get up for work the next day. I also played it.
Okay,
What are we on now? Are we on
yes.
Roller Coaster Tycoon?
Ooh.
And S, Caroline.
That's good. SimCity, which I installed on every single computer in my secondary school. Tetris was in sixth form. SimCity was in year 7.
Okay, T. It would be good if I could not just do something that starts with the. I wish I had S. I'll do what I did last time and go with the sinking city and see if I think of anything else that starts with T. What comes after T? U. Jen.
Ultima. Ultima Online. I helped out. I was a community manager support person for Ultima Online when I was at EA. So yeah.
I'll go with Thronebreaker for T, a Witcher card game of Gwent, which is just a masterpiece. You can get it on your phone now. Thronebreaker, very very worth doing. TUV.
V for Valkyrie. Is that a game? No. Yes. No. Wait.
Is that a game?
What was the one that you played, Caroline?
Valheim.
Valheim. Yes, I knew it was a V. It was Viking-esque. Yes.
It's like give me W, which I've never played it, but I'm going with World of Warcraft.
Dun, dun, dun.
WX.
X. I mean, I'd like to go to bed before midnight.
Yeah. I think the last four might be a bit tricky.
Could I suggest a possible option? I don't even know if this is a real thing. Was there ever a Triple X game? You can ring me. Hello.
I bet there was a Triple X game.
I think there probably was a Triple X game.
That would work.
Well, since I'm the judge,
but also there's an actual good game that we could mention here. XCOM.
Shit bags.
Yeah.
Of course
we'll go with XCOM.
Okay. Yeah.
Why? Jen, why?
Well, I don't know if I was really struggling with why, but I'm guessing there must be a game, a Yahtzee game somewhere. So
I don't think we can go with such a general answer.
I think Yahtzee is a game.
What does the rest of the panel think?
Yahtzee is technically a game.
I'd be going with You Don't Know Jack, which was the predecessor of the Jackbox Party games.
Oh, well, there you go. That one.
I'm cheating and using my Steam library, sorry.
And for our final one, Z.
I'm going to shout out to my friend Victoria if she's watching this eventually, and it will be Z for Zelda, because it's her favourite.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think that's everything.
Yay.
Well done, everyone, for completing that challenge and for a fantastic, really interesting, eye-opening episode. So to sign off, we have been gaming the system. You can please do, if you're on YouTube, do give us a like and a comment. That is really awesome. And subscribe if you wish. We've got tons and tons of feminist gaming videos and Let's Plays for you to look at. As well as the long-form podcast and bonus rounds. We are live every Thursday at 7 p.m. There will always be something on that day. please follow us on Facebook. And a really helpful thing, if you're listening on audio, go into Apple Podcasts or the iTunes podcast, the purple icon, and give us a 5-star rating and a comment, because that really helps us get the word out about what we're doing. So until next time, we will see you then.
Bye.